David Mitchell's hand squeezed around his daughter's backpack as he scanned the hospital corridor. Lily, Emma, Sophie, he exclaimed. His voice had that tone that every father knows, the one that oscillates between irritation and panic. They had been right next to him for 30 seconds, and now they had left. He had only been distracted for a moment to check his phone to see the room numbers of Sophie's appointment, and his 6-year-old twins had vanished like smoke. Girls, he exclaimed, turning in circles as his heart rate increased. The pediatric wing of the Mercy General was a labyrinth. Endless corridors, identical doors, and his daughters had the capacity of attention combined with a squirrel with caffeine. Then he heard it, laughter. That particular type of naughty laughter that meant that his daughters were, absolutely and definitely, 100%, in a place where they shouldn't be. He followed the sound down the corridor, past the nurse station, turned a corner. The laughter got louder. Girls, this isn't funny. We're going to be late for... He grabbed the door handle of room 247, opened the door suddenly, and froze. This wasn't Sophie's check-in room. This was the world of another person. The end of another person. The woman in the bed turned her head. Young, perhaps 30 years old. Her blonde hair spread over the pillow like spilled sunlight. Eyes the color of a winter sky. And in those eyes, resignation. That stillness that comes when you've already said goodbye. Her 3 daughters were at the foot of her bed. Lily's little hand was already reaching out to the woman's fingers. Emma had climbed to the middle of the mattress. Sophie looked with that disturbing wisdom that sometimes 6-year-old children have, the one that sees the truth directly. "Daddy," whispered Lily, without taking her eyes off the woman. "She's alone. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you tune us in. We love to see how far our stories travel." David's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He should grab his daughters, apologize, leave. This was private, sacred, the final chapter of a stranger, and they just erupted as if they were the owners of the place. But something stopped it. Perhaps it was the way the woman's expression changed when she saw her daughters. No irritation, no confusion. Something else. Something that seemed dangerously close to hope. "I'm very sorry," David finally managed to say, taking a step towards the room. "My daughters have a gift for getting into trouble. We were looking for room 274, and she just... It's okay," said the woman's voice, soft, tired, but not rude. "They're beautiful." Emma, always the most daring, completely climbed into bed now, her little body settling close to the woman's hip, as if they had known each other all their lives. "What's your name?" "Emma, get down right now," said David. The shame invaded his chest. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. Girls, we have to go now." "Clara," said the woman, completely ignoring him. Her gaze was fixed on Emma. "My name is Clara." "I'm Emma. That's Lily. That's Sophie." Emma pointed to each of her sisters in turn. "We're triplets. That means we all have the same birthday, but we're different people." Clara's lips curved in the slightest smile. "I can see it. You're very different." "Why are you here alone?" Sophie asked, with the frankness that only children possess. "Don't you have a family?" David felt his stomach shrunk. Sophie, that's not... You can't just ask people." "It's okay," said Clara again, but this time her voice cracked slightly. Her throat lightened. She looked out the window, where the gray light of February leaked through the half-closed curtains. "No, I don't have a family." Lily, still holding Clara's hand, pressed harder. "That's really sad, Lily." David tried again, but his voice had lost its authority, because it was sad, devastating, actually. To die alone in a hospital room, without anyone holding your hand, without anyone telling you that everything would be fine, even when it wouldn't be. Clara looked at the triplets, and something in her expression changed. The resignation flickered, replaced by something raw. "It's sad," she whispered, "but that's how things are sometimes." "No, it's not," said Emma, with the stubbornness of a 6-year-old girl who hadn't yet learned that the world didn't bend to kindness. "Now you have us." David held his breath. He should. He really should leave, but his feet didn't move. And his daughters, his beautiful, empathetic, and naughty daughters, had already decided that that woman wasn't a stranger anymore. The door opened behind them, and a nurse came in. Her expression went from professional to confused when she saw David and the girls. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know Clara had visitors." "They're about to leave," Clara said quickly, too quickly, as if trying to save them from discomfort. "Actually," David heard her say, and still couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. "We were hoping to stay a little longer if Clara liked it." 3 pairs of identical brown eyes turned to look at him with expressions of pure joy. The nurse seemed surprised. "And Clara?" Clara seemed as if someone had just given her something she had forgotten existed. "Excuse me for not being alone." "Oh, yes," Clara muttered. "If you want, but don't have anything to do." David looked at his watch. Sophie's appointment was in 20 minutes. He could reschedule it. "Nothing is more important than this," he said softly. The nurse sighed slowly. A look of understanding crossed her face. "I'll be back in a moment to check the vital signs," he said, and then he left, gently closing the door behind her. The silence took over the room, not uncomfortable, but full of the strangeness of the situation for strangers who had collided by accident, or perhaps for something completely different. "So," David said, approaching a chair to the bed and sitting down, "I'm David, and I apologize in advance for anything my daughters say in the next 10 minutes. They have no filter." Clara laughed. She really laughed. A genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. "I like that about them." "What's wrong with you?" Sophie asked, standing at the foot of the bed like a tiny bird. "Why do you have all these tubes?" David's face turned red, but Clara only smiled. Sadness flowed back into her eyes. "I'm sick. Very sick. My heart doesn't work as it should." "Can the doctors fix it?" Lily asked. Clara doubted. "They're trying, but sometimes the bodies just don't want to cooperate." "You should try harder," said Emma. "Seriously, tell your body to behave." "I hope it works that way, darling." "Yes, it works," Emma insisted. "You just have to wish for it, with a lot of desire." David wanted to explain that a terminal disease didn't work that way, that wanting wasn't enough, that sometimes the world was cruel and unfair, and the 6-year-old girl still didn't understand it. But when he saw Clara's face, the way something changed there, something small but real, he kept his mouth shut. "Maybe you're right," whispered Clara. "Maybe I didn't wish for it with enough strength." The next hour, David sat in the hospital room and watched his daughters do their particular kind of magic. They told Clara about their school, their cat named Professor Mustache, their father's terrible attempts at making pancakes. Emma showed him a drawing she had made that morning of a rainbow unicorn fighting a dragon. Lily sang a song she had learned in music class, slightly out of tune, but with tremendous enthusiasm. Sophie simply took Clara's hand and asked her questions. What was her favorite color? Did she like ice cream? Did she believe in mermaids? And Clara came to life. The resignation vanished from her eyes, replaced by genuine laughter, real smiles, moments when she forgot she was dying and simply existed in the present, with 3 chaotic 6-year-old girls who decided she was worth their time. David found himself observing her, really looking at her. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, there was something about the way she interacted with her daughters, the sweetness in her answers, the way she shined when Emma got on her lap to show her the drawing of the unicorn. She would have been a wonderful mother. Thought struck her like a punch in the chest. It would have in the past, because Clara would not have had that opportunity. Her wife, Jennifer, had died 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Fast, brutal, and completely unfair. She had stayed with 3 5-year-old girls who did not understand why mommy would not return home, and had spent the last 24 months trying to be both parents while drowning in pain. He could not show them. He understood the loss. He understood the empty pain of a stolen future. "Mr. Mitchell." The nurse nodded her head again, apologizing. "I hate to interrupt, but I need to take Clara's vital signs and administer her medication." David looked at his watch. They had been there for more than an hour. Sophie's appointment had already passed a long time ago. "Of course, girls, we have to let Clara rest." The protests were immediate and loud, but we just got here. We haven't finished talking. Can't we stay a little longer? "You can come back," said Clara quickly. Then she seemed to correct herself. Uncertainty flashed on her face. "I mean, if you want to, you don't have to. I'm sure you're busy with—" "We want to," David interrupted. He met his eyes. He saw the vulnerability there, the fear of waiting for something and being disappointed. "We'll be back tomorrow, if you don't mind." Clara's eyes were filled with tears. He quickly held them, feeling them. Yes, that would be... yes. Lily hugged her first, surrounding Clara's neck with her little arms. Then Emma, then Sophie, who whispered something to Clara's ear that made her smile through the tears. David didn't ask what his daughter said. Some things were destined to stay between a dying woman and the 6-year-old girl. As they left the room, David looked back. Clara was watching them go, a hand pressed against her chest. Her expression a mixture of amazement and something that seemed dangerously close to hope. That night, after putting the girls to bed, David sat in his kitchen and looked at his phone. He searched on Google for Clara's condition. Extended cardiomyopathy, advanced stage. The prognosis was bleak. Weeks, maybe months, if he was lucky, and she was alone. There was no registered family or emergency contacts beyond his doctor. How could someone reach 30 without anyone? What kind of life had Clara led to end up dying in a hospital room without visitors until 3 curious sparkles erupted by accident? I should have let it pass. I had had enough. 3 daughters to raise, a demanding job as an architect, a house that was always a disaster away from chaos. Getting involved with a strange, dying woman wasn't smart. It wasn't practical. It would only end in more pain, more loss, more explanations to her daughters as to why another person she loved wouldn't come back. But she kept looking at Clara's face when Emma had climbed up to her lap. She kept listening to how she laughed at Sophie's bad jokes. She kept remembering how her daughters had refused to leave because they had seen something in Clara that everyone else had apparently overlooked. Someone worth staying for. The next day, David showed up in room 247 with 3 girls, a book to color and a soup bowl his mother had made. The station nurse smiled when she saw them. "Clara has been asking about you all morning," she said in a low voice. I think they made a big impression. Clara was sitting when they came in, and David could see immediately that she had made an effort. She had her hair brushed, falling in soft waves on her shoulders. She was wearing a different coat, still in the hospital, but somehow she had managed to make her look less clinical. She had put on lip gloss, and her eyes, those winter sky-colored eyes, lit up the moment she saw them. She exhaled. "We said we would do it," said Emma naturally, going up to bed. "We brought you soup and pages to color," added Lily, showing the book. "Dad said you could get bored." "I thought maybe we could all color together," said David, bringing the chairs closer. "If you feel strong." During the next 2 hours, they colored. Clara's hand trembled slightly as she held the crayons, but she worked carefully, focused on a butterfly that Lily had chosen for her. The girls chatted nonstop about Professor Mustache's new adventure of getting stuck in the dryer, about how Sophie had lost another tooth, about the spelling test that Emma had passed with an outstanding score. David found himself just watching. The way Clara asked questions, really listened to the answers, laughed in the right moments, the way her daughters had adopted her completely and totally in their world without hesitation, the way something painful in her chest began to lighten slightly in the presence of Clara. "Can I ask you something?" said Clara in a low voice. I was watching David with a cautious expression. "Of course. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. And He took a break. He swallowed saliva with difficulty. "I'm dying. I'll be nothing but trouble, expense, and disappointment." "You're not a stranger," said David firmly. "Not anymore. You are our friend, and friends show up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Clara moved in on a Tuesday in March. The girls had decorated her room with crayon drawings, had picked flowers from the garden, had arranged their stuffed animals on the bed so she wouldn't feel alone. David helped her inside, supporting her weight as she slowly shuffled from the car to the house. She was so thin now, so fragile, but her eyes shone as she looked around his home. "It's perfect," she exhaled. "It's so perfectly normal, chaotic, and full of life." "That's one way to say it," said David with a smile. "I usually say disaster zone, but yours is nicer." The first few weeks were hard. Clara had good days and bad days. Days when she could sit at the kitchen table and color with the girls. and days when she couldn't get out of bed, where pain etched lines on her face, and all David could do was adjust her medication and hold her hand until it passed. His daughters faced it with the resilience of children who had already learned that love meant staying even when things were tough. They brought Clara breakfast in bed on the bad days. They read her stories. They sat quietly doing their homework in her room so she wouldn't be alone. And slowly, impossibly, Clara got stronger, not cured. The sickness was still there. It was still progressing, but stronger. She started walking to the kitchen without help. She started laughing more. She started talking about the future in terms of weeks and months instead of days. "It's extraordinary," said Dr. Patel during a home visit. "I've seen cases where will and purpose extended life. But this is extraordinary. Whatever you are doing here is working. What they were doing was living simply, ordinarily, and beautifully." Clara helped the girls with homework at the kitchen table. She taught them to bake cookies that only sometimes burned. She sat in the garden while they played, her face turned toward the sun, soaking up a warmth she thought she would never feel again. And David found himself falling not just into routine or responsibility, but into something deeper, something that terrified him because he had sworn after Jennifer's death that he would never ever let himself love this much again. The pain of loss was too great. The risk was too high. But Clara wasn't Jennifer. She was herself, quiet where Jennifer had been loud, gentle where Jennifer had been fierce. She made bad jokes that made the girls groan. She cried at animated movies. She had a habit of leaving her coffee mug in random places around the house. And when she smiled at him over breakfast, something in David's chest ached in a way that felt dangerously close to hope. 6 months after Clara moved in, David's mother came to visit. She saw Clara playing dolls with the triplets in the living room. She saw David watching Clara with soft eyes and pulled him into the kitchen. "Are you in love with her?" she said, not as a question. David started to deny it. Then he stopped. "Yes. And does she know?" "No. And she can't. Mom, she's still sick. She's getting better. But she's not cured. I can't burden her with that. The pressure of knowing I have feelings while she's fighting just to survive. It wouldn't be fair." His mother studied him for a long moment. "Your father had a heart attack when you were 10. Do you remember?" David nodded. He remembered the terror, the hospital, the uncertainty. "The doctors said he might not make it," his mother continued. "They said even if he survived, his quality of life would decline. They told me to prepare for the worst. And do you know what I did?" "What?" "I told him I loved him every day because I realized that if those were going to be his last days, I wanted them to be full of love, not fear. I wanted him to know he was wanted, that he mattered, that he was worth fighting for, and he fought. 30 years later, he is still here. But even if he hadn't been, I wouldn't regret having loved him out loud." David felt tears burning his eyes. "What if I lose her, Mom? What if I finally let myself feel this and she?" "Then you will hurt and you will suffer. But David, you are already in love with her. You are already involved. You are already going to suffer if something happens to her." The only question is if you want her to know she is loved before it is too late. That night, after the girls were asleep, David sat with Clara in the garden. Summer had arrived and fireflies danced in the warm darkness. Clara was wrapped in a blanket despite the heat, but she was smiling, peaceful. "Can I tell you something?" said David softly. "Always." He took a breath. He took the leap. "I'm falling in love with you. In fact, I think I already fell in love somewhere between the hospital room and the kitchen table, and watching you teach Lily how to braid hair. And I know the timing is terrible. And I know you might not feel the same. And I know you have every right to tell me this is too much. But my mom reminded me today that life is uncertain and short. We have no guarantees. So I just wanted you to know, you aren't just someone we're helping. You are someone who," his voice cracked, "someone I love." Clara was silent for so long that David thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then she spoke. Her voice barely a whisper. "I've never been loved before. Not by my parents, not by my foster families, not by anyone. I didn't think I was the kind of person who was loved. And then 3 little girls burst into my hospital room and decided I was worth saving. And their father looked at me like I was a person, not a patient. And for the first time in my life, I thought maybe I did matter. Maybe I was worth something." She turned to look at him. Tears ran down her face. "I'm scared, David. I'm scared of getting worse again. Scared of hurting your daughters when I die. Scared of breaking your heart. Scared of ruining this beautiful thing you've given me." "You're not going to ruin anything," said David, holding her hand. "And yes, if we lose you, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot. But Clara, this life we've had, this life you've built with us, is worth the risk. You are worth the risk." "I love you too," whispered Clara. "I love you so much it terrifies me." David pulled her close, and she collapsed against his chest, and they stayed there in the garden while the fireflies danced and the world turned, and 2 broken people held each other up. The next morning, the triplets found them asleep on the couch. Clara curled up next to David, his arm around her shoulders. They screamed with joy, jumping on the couch, demanding to know if this meant Clara was now their mom. "Not yet," said David, laughing. "But maybe someday soon," insisted Lily. That day came 8 months later. Clara had been living with them for over a year, and against all odds, against every medical prediction, she was still here, still fighting, still laughing at Sophie's jokes and burning cookies with Emma and letting Lily practice braiding her hair. Her doctor called it a medical miracle. David called it love. Clara called it being given a reason to stay. On a Saturday morning in November, David took Clara back to Mercy General Hospital, not as a patient, but as a visitor, back to room 247, which at that moment was empty, waiting for its next occupant. "Why are we here?" Clara asked, confused. David knelt right there in the hospital room, took out a ring he had carried with him for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Because this was where my life changed. Where 3 naughty girls opened the wrong door and found someone extraordinary. Where I learned that love follows no rules, no timelines, no logic. where I met the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with, whatever the length of that life may be. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Clara Bennett, would you marry me? Would you let 3 little girls call you Mom? Would you let me love you? For every day we have left, be it weeks or months or years or decades, would you take this ridiculous, chaotic, and beautiful life we have built and make it official? Yes, sobbed Clara. Yes, yes, yes. The wedding was small. David's parents, a handful of friends, Clara's doctor, who had become something like family, and 3 flower girls in matching purple dresses, who took their job very seriously, scattering petals with military precision, while Professor Mustache watched with judgment from his carrier. Clara wore white. She was still thin, still fragile, but radiant. When she walked down the aisle, she walked without help, strong enough now to do it on her own. David felt tears running down his face. You came back to me, he whispered when she reached him. You gave me a reason to, she whispered back. They said their vows in the same hospital chapel where David had once prayed for his wife to survive, where he had said goodbye to Jennifer, where he thought his story had ended, but it hadn't ended. It had just been waiting to start again. I promised to love you on the good days and the bad days, said Clara with a firm voice. To show up even when it's hard, to choose you every morning, to be the mother your daughters deserve, and the partner you need, to live every day as the gift that it is. Because now I know that not everyone gets second chances, and you and Lily and Emma and Sophie are my second chance. David couldn't speak through his tears. He could only take her hands and nod, trying to convey everything he felt with the squeeze of his fingers, the look in his eyes. The officiant declared them married. The triplets cheered, and David kissed his wife, his second chance, his unexpected miracle. The woman who had been dying until 3 little girls decided she wasn't allowed to give up. 2 years later, Clara was in the garden of their house, watching David chase 3 8-year-old girls who were pretending to be dragons. Her hand rested on her chest, feeling the steady beat of her heart, still damaged, still fragile, but beating. She defied all odds, lived beyond every prognosis. Her doctor called it unprecedented. Her husband called it stubbornness. She called it being loved back to life. Mama Clara, called Emma. Come be a dragon with us, Mama Clara. She never thought she would hear those words. She never thought she would have a family, a home, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just surviving one more day. She joined the game, roaring dramatically while the girls squealed with laughter. David met her gaze from across the garden. He smiled with that soft smile that still made her heart stutter and told her silently, I love you. I love you too, she replied silently. That night, after the girls were tucked in with elaborate dragon-themed bedtime stories, Clara found David in the kitchen. He was loading the dishwasher, a task he tackled with an engineering precision that made her smile. Do you ever think about that day? She asked, leaning against the counter. The wrong door. David turned, studied her face. Every day. Do you think it was really the wrong door? I mean, he walked over to her, pulled her into his arms. No. I think 3 naughty girls knew exactly what they were doing. I think they saw someone who needed to be saved, and they refused to leave. I think they guided me exactly where I needed to go, even if I was too stubborn to realize it at the time. Clara rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I was so ready to die, she whispered. I made peace with it. And then your daughters burst in like little hurricanes and decided I wasn't allowed to give up. And suddenly I had a reason to fight, a reason to try, a reason to believe that tomorrow might be worth seeing. I'm glad they're stubborn, muttered David into her hair. Me too. There's something I never told you, she said softly. About that day, the day your daughters found me. David frowned with concern. What is it? Clara took his hand. She led him to the kitchen table. They sat down, and she took both of his hands in hers. That morning, I had made a decision. She began. The doctors had told me I had maybe 2 weeks left. The pain was getting worse. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every breath felt like drowning. And I thought, what is the point? Why prolong it? David's hand tightened on hers. That morning, I told the nurses I was done. No more medication, no more fighting. I just wanted to sleep and not wake up. Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks. And then I heard that sound, giggles, little girls' giggles in the hallway. And I remember thinking how cruel it was that the last sound I would hear would be a joy I would never get to experience. Clara, the door opened, she continued, and there they were, 3 identical little girls with curly hair and bright eyes. And they looked at me like I was a person, not a dying patient, like I mattered. And Lily took my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Connection. Like maybe I wasn't completely alone in the universe. She looked at David. You saved my life that day. Not just medically. You saved me from giving up. Your daughters burst through that door and decided I was worth staying for. And suddenly I had a reason to take my medication, a reason to eat, a reason to fight one more day just to see them again. David stood up. He pulled her up with him, and he hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. I love you, he said fiercely. I love you so much. I know, whispered Clara. And that is the miracle. Not that my heart kept beating. The miracle is that I learned what it feels like to be loved, to be chosen, to belong somewhere. You gave me something I spent 32 years believing I would never have. A family, a home, a reason to wake up smiling. She held his face between her hands. Your daughters didn't just save me, David. They taught you that it was okay to love again, to risk your heart again, to believe that maybe happiness was still possible after loss. And they taught me that I was worth loving, worth fighting for, worth the effort. You are, said David firmly. You always were. You just needed someone to see it. 3 someones, smiled Clara. 3 little, stubborn, and beautiful someones who refused to take no for an answer. I want to do something, said Clara. I want to go back to that hospital, not as a patient, but as a volunteer. I want to visit the people who are alone, those without family, without visitors. I want to be for someone else what your daughters were for me. David's eyes shone with pride. Clara, that is beautiful. I know I still have limitations, but I am here, and I want to make sure no one else feels as alone as I felt. Just a few hours a week sitting with people, reminding them that they are seen. When do you start? Asked David. Next month, if that's okay with you. More than okay. I am in awe of you. The girls want to help people when they grow up, said Clara. That's what families do. David nodded. They learn from the best. Later that night, David watched Clara sleep. 2 years ago, he had been drowning in grief. Then, 3 naughty girls chased Giggles down a hallway, burst through the wrong door, and found someone worth saving. They had been right. Outside his window, the world turned. Morning would come with its chaos. The girls would argue. Professor Mustache would knock something over. Life would be messy and perfectly imperfect. And David and Clara would face it together, proving that sometimes wrong doors led exactly where you need to go. That sometimes happy endings are real. Upstairs, 3 little girls slept peacefully. In the morning, they would wake up for breakfast, fight over the blue bowl, argue about feeding Professor Mustache, an ordinary and chaotic family. Sometimes, the wrong door takes you exactly where you were meant to be. Sometimes, 3 6-year-old girls know better than anyone who deserves to be saved. And sometimes that is enough to change everything. If this story touched your heart the same way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you that kindness still matters, that compassion still changes lives, and that hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Heart Echo Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it. Because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do. Later that night, David watched Clara sleep. 2 years ago, he had been drowning in grief. Then, 3 naughty girls chased Giggles down a hallway, burst through the wrong door, and found someone worth saving. They had been right. Outside his window, the world turned. Morning would come with its chaos. The girls would argue. Professor Mustache would knock something over. Life would be messy and perfectly imperfect, and David and Clara would face it together, proving that sometimes wrong doors lead exactly where you need to go, that sometimes happy endings are real. Upstairs, 3 little girls slept peacefully. In the morning, they would wake up for breakfast, fight over the blue bowl, argue about feeding Professor Mustache, an ordinary and chaotic family. Sometimes the wrong door takes you exactly where you were meant to be. Sometimes 3 6-year-old girls know better than anyone who deserves to be saved, and sometimes that is enough to change everything.